Until one has loved an animal, a part of one's soul remains unawakened. That's a quote by Anatole France. And you will learn very soon why I picked that quote. Before I do, I want to remind you that if you go to lucydumascoaching.com, you can find more about me. There's a couple of gifts. There's a place to book just a 20-minute call, no obligation, just want to support you. So I'm super excited. I've been waiting and hoping and wishing that Judy's life would slow down enough that she could find time for this interview. So I'm so excited that Judy Reinford is my guest today. She is, gosh, she's an award-winning photographer. She has her Master Craftsman, Master Artist, and her CPP degrees from the Professional Photographers of America. She has a Bachelor of Fine Arts, among other wonderful things that she's earned. The list is pretty long. She's an amazing animal photographer, and lucky for us, she travels around the country teaching the secrets to transforming equine, pet, and zoo photographs into stunning works of art. And you must go to her website. If you're watching this on YouTube, it's okay to pause and go pull that up, but come back. And she has earned the PPA IPC 2024 Gold Medal Award, 4-time GIA nomination. From 2019 to 22, she's an International Diamond Photographer of the Year. So I think she knows some stuff, right? Also, it's clear on her website that horses are her main love, both to photograph, and now she just loves teaching others. Her seminars focus on photographing and creating exquisite fine art equine portraits, and she shares techniques for creating meaningful photographs aimed at supporting local zoos and rescues. So that's awesome. And if you go to her photography website or her course website, she's got many online courses you can download. So if you're like, I need more, that's a place to go. She does on location and in studio sessions and uses digital mixed media and fairy tale composites as some of her tools in her toolbox. Phew, that's a lot of good stuff to share. So thank you so much, Judy, for being on my show today.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, so I want to know, first of all, just a little, so you're where are you?
I'm in Pennsylvania. I'm about an hour north of Philadelphia.
Are there lots of horses in Philadelphia? I mean, yeah, in Pennsylvania. Yeah.
Yeah. Some of the biggest competitions of the year are just outside of Philadelphia. So it's a good place. It's a good place to be, enjoy horsemanship and horses.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I just noticed that Rain is part of your last name, and I wondered if that influenced your horse leaning or if it's just a total cosmic coincidence.
No. That's funny. No, I never thought about it actually.
Never, ever. So
No.
Lucy means light. And when I learned that, I realized, oh, of course, I ended up being a photographer. So yeah, sometimes names are surprisingly perfect. Okay, so I'd love to know a little about how long you've been doing this professionally, how you got started either in photography or decided to have a business. So sharing is caring.
So I've been answering these questions a lot lately, which keeps it fresh in my mind, which is great. So at like age 6 or so, I think 6 or 7, I was actually in the dark room with my grandfather.
Oh, wow.
And I remember the image coming to life in a tray of chemicals. And I remember the red light. And I remember him saying, don't turn the light on, And I mean, I only have that one memory. I don't have many others about the dark room, but it really stuck with me.
Mm-hmm.
I got my first professional camera at 13, and I shot my first paid gig if you want to call it
Mhm.
that, 19.
Mm.
And during the summers, when I was home from college, I actually ran a black and white darkroom at a big commercial lab that also had um, a photo studio that people rented by the hour,
Mhm.
and several people used on a regular basis. So I had access to that studio as well. And while I was working there, I think it was the summer I was 19, actually, I bought a 4x5 camera.
Mm. I've never
So
actually shot with a 4x5, so I much respect for for you owning one. So what did you use that on right
so
away?
initially I got it. I was getting a degree in commercial art, so it was a BFA from Kutztown University, but all of my fine art electives were in photography.
Hmm.
They didn't actually have a class on 4x5, and this was the 80s, so there was no YouTube or anything like that. So I just figured out how to use it on my own because we didn't have a class that actually taught that.
Hmm.
Uh, but it was a good thing that I did, because my first job out of college, I got hired by Hess's department stores to be one of their photographers in the advertising department. And I was hired to photograph everything from perfume bottles to bed linens, jewelry, china, you name it. And 90% of the stuff we were shooting was actually on 4x5 or 8x10.
Mm.
So I already had experience with the 4x5, and the 8x10 was just bigger, and the ladder you got on was just taller. Um, Funniest memory, because this is like 1989. I had to photograph a Ralph Lauren polo bottle, the famous green bottle with the gold logo. And we were responsible for creating our sets and how the image ended up looking, like our vision. We were allowed to, be creative and create the whole look of the image. And I gathered up, some old barnwood in a saddle, had a crop. I had the bottle laying in this very equestrian looking set.
Hmm.
And the art director had said to me, whatever you do whatever you can so there's no air bubble in the bottle. Okay, well, if we had Photoshop in 1989, that would have been easy, but we didn't. And back then they used something called Cytex, and Cytex was like $700 an hour, so nobody wanted to pay for it.
Right.
So you had to come up with creative ways to do edits in camera. So the lights were on the bottle, and they're pretty warm, the modeling lights, and I knew that they would expand the bubble in the bottle, and I was up on a 10-foot ladder waiting and waiting and waiting for that bubble to get smaller and smaller. And I got the shot, and 5 seconds later the bottle exploded, and there was polo everywhere in my studio, and it smelled like polo for the next year.
Oh,
And to this day I cannot smell polo
oh,
without bringing back that memory.
oh gosh. Yeah, some of our memories aren't all rainbows and unicorns, even at a shoot like that. So when you open your own studio, did you start with animals? I know looking at your portrait website, you also do incredible people. That or I'll just say, when did you start doing animals? How did that unfold?
So over the last like 30 plus years, 40 years, yeah, 40 years, I kind of bounced around a little bit, and I finally settled with animals um part-time, like, still doing other things, but I kind of really wanted to focus on animals around 2010. And somehow fate took me down the road of newborn photography, and I got really good at it. I don't have kids. I have 7 dogs. I'm a co-owner of a horse. How I ended up photographing newborns is still kind of, I think, God's little joke on me. And um, you know, it was like a snowball that couldn't stop. I kept getting all these newborn clients, and I was miserable. I mean,
Mm.
people that you interview, they say, oh, I really want to be a full-time photographer and quit my day job. Well, for me, I was like, I really want to quit my day job and not photograph babies anymore. And, that was my day job. And so finally, when COVID hit, obviously photographing newborns became extremely inaccessible. I actually, during COVID, had several women like they were scheduled for newborn sessions and we weren't allowed to work here in Pennsylvania. I actually on Zoom walked them through how to photograph the baby. And then they sent me the photos and I composited them into beautiful backgrounds and made them look like they were shot in the studio.
Wow.
But at the end of that, there were like 3 or 4 women that I had to finish up with during the beginning of 2020, or I should say the middle of 2020 into the fall of 2020, and one in January of 2021. And then I was like, that's it. I'm full-time animals. This is what I want to do. And I've been super happy ever since.
Right. Yeah, I probably 15 years ago, I started getting like an awareness that pet photography, animal photography was the emerging huge potential limited competition for fine photographs that people use as art in their homes. And I'm not a dog person. I am the person that loves photographing those babies, but I've helped in my coaching many people build really successful animal photography businesses because it's just such an open niche, and the people that love their pets often love them more than their kids. I've heard. I don't know. Have you heard that from people sometimes?
I mean, yeah, I had a client who was actually more excited about the dog photos than the newborn.
Yeah.
And she felt a little guilty about it. But I just thought it was really hysterical.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. I've heard it many times. When I've included a pet in a family portrait, I remember some people say, I really love this dog more than I love my kids right now. So the moral of that story is there's lots of potential photographing animals as fine art. So go ahead.
Because with newborns, there's an urgency when they're born. And with pets, there's an urgency before you lose them. So it's a call to action with pets, just like there is with newborns. It's just slightly different because their lifespans are so short. Even if they make it to 18, that's still short. So getting them between ages like 5 and 8, depending on the breed, is always key, to get those people to say, hey, we really want to capture this animal before it's too late.
Yeah. And the nice thing is they won't say, oh, I can't have wall art of this because they're going to grow and change and then I'll have to replace it like they do with a child. So, I have a sweet portrait of my cat Spirit, and Spirit's been gone 8 years, and the 5 years of the last of his life, he was kind of ragged. I always wondered, okay, is it time? Is it time? And then he'd recover. So I love feeling like I can be with him again, seeing these portraits. So
right.
I'm really torn about what kind of info I want to kind of wind out of your brain and experience, because I love to talk about using Photoshop and AI to enhance your work. But do you have any quick tips? Now, I'm super excited about the fact that last month, my women's photography group, we get together and do creative things, did horses and their riders. And we had 10 different people. And we were at, I guess it's a stable, arena, all the things. And so I just recently had experience doing a lot of horse photographs and editing, and wishing I knew more about editing in AI to add a little pizzazz. So, do you have some tips about specifically photographing horses?
Sure. Um, yeah, I mean, I learned how to photograph horses uh during COVID actually.
Mm,
I rode as a kid, it was one of those things you did as a kid, and then I got away from horses for many years. And um, what happened during the summer of 2020 when we were finally allowed to leave the house, I mean, every state was different. I think some states barely experienced what some of us experienced. I'm sure in California, as you know, it was really rough. And I started watching the show Heartland, which any horse person would laugh because it's like in season 18 now or something. I mean, the lead actress was 16 when the show started, and now she's one of the producers. Well, anyway, I got really interested in horses again and started riding summer of 2020, because that was something that was not completely closed down. And the whole reason I started riding was I wanted to photograph horses, and I didn't know enough about them to approach horse owners. I didn't know the lingo and all the gear
mm,
and all the tack and things like that. It's a whole culture. And so I started riding. And what I discovered is your number one customer for equine photography is a woman over 45.
mm,
And they're in that stage of their life where the kids are grown, they're at their highest income potential, and there's a lot of women riding, in this kind of second chapter of their life. And
mm-hmm,
that is like, in a way, when people say, oh, the kids went off to college, so we bought a dog. Well, in some cases, the kids went off to college and we bought a horse. And so with photographing horses and people, the biggest thing to be aware is, I mean, if you've already been photographing people, you know what camera lenses to use with people. Well, with horses, you never want to shoot below 135 millimeter.
mm,
The horse will start to look distorted, and things like the head will be coming, like the head will look too big, the body of the horse won't look correct. It might not look bad to you as a photographer who maybe doesn't totally understand the breed of horse. I mean, there's hundreds of breeds of horses, but to the owner, they would be very upset if you made their horse look like a donkey, or you made their horse look shorter than it is, or taller than it is, or fatter than it is. So I always say shoot between 135 and 200. If you have a 70 to 200, 9 times out of 10, depending on the brand of camera, 70 to 200s, 2.8s are really fast. So that's a great lens to take and photograph someone with or without their horse. And
okay.
if you're photographing the horse by itself, the same applies. You want to be at 135 or greater. I have had reason to have to shoot at 90 because of my location, and it's okay, but it's not as good as being at 135 or higher.
Okay.
The other thing I was going to
Okay,
mention.
hold on before we go on. So don't forget that. Okay, now go ahead and tell me, and then I'll try to remember what I was going to ask you. Sorry. The other thing you were going to mention is,
The other thing I was going to mention is, if you start photographing horses and you're trying to get beautiful action shots for an owner, and you're running into a lot of problems with the horses being out of focus, and you're still shooting with a DSLR, it might be time to consider one of the mirrorless systems with eye tracking.
mm,
Horses having usually dark eyes, and many times having medium or dark colored fur are a little tricky to capture sharp, eyes on the animal. So I switched to Sony in 2018, actually preparing to start shooting more animals, and I was really happy that I did.
so which do you do, center spot? Do you do a range? I've got a Sony now, and I'm not as accurate with my focusing as I was with my Canon 5D Mark III.
Yeah, there's a learning curve for sure. It depends on the model of Sony camera. I shoot with A1s. I have two Sony A1s, and I'm shooting on continuous focus, animal eye tracking, center spot.
Okay.
That works for me. I just returned from photographing puffins from a moving, bouncing little lobster boat in Maine, and I'm photographing a little tiny bird, and I was really happy with how much was in focus, and I'm shooting with a 600 millimeter.
Okay. So thank you for that. The thing that I wanted to go back on tip number 2. So number 1 is know your audience. If you're wanting to sell your photographic art, a woman over 45 is ideal. Number 2 is keeping your millimeters at 135 or higher. So a lot of people out there, I believe, don't understand lens distortion and how, a 35 or a 50 or 100 or 135 is going to change things. Can you explain that?
Boy, that's an easier explanation in a visual than in a verbal. I would suggest, if you're going to start photographing horses and you don't necessarily have access to a horse to practice on, you're going to have a really hard time. So I would try to find a horse, someone who you can offer something to for practice purposes, and take various length lenses and photograph the horse just standing still with the owner holding a lead line or something. Photograph the horse at 70, 90, 135, 150, and 200, and you'll see right away like the difference. And short of me pulling up images right now to show that, it's something that I think that you have to kind of see it for yourself. I mean, can you photograph a horse with a wide angle lens? Yes, you can. So if you're doing kind of that big sky creative off camera flash look, and you have a woman in a gown with a horse, if you have them in the center quadrant, if you have the 9 squares and you have them kind of in the center quadrant where the less distortion is, yes, you can do that. I mean, you can break any rule you want as long as it looks good. At the end of the day, the client has to like it and you have to like it. So that's just kind of a guideline as to what you should try to stick to.
Got it. So to see if I can summarize just a little bit about the distortion issue. First of all, you can Google portraits of people at different focal lengths, and you'll pull up whole charts where it'll be like, this was at 25, one face, and all the way up, and you'll see with a human that at about 100, that's when we look our most normal. And also, like with a wide angle lens, the sides, things look bigger on the sides. So like if I'm going to be in a group photo, I get right in the middle, because I know that if I get stuck at the end, I'm going to look about 3 sizes bigger. One of my favorite lenses for people portraits is the 24 to 105 f4 L series, because I get that 100 millimeter portrait lens. A lot of people love their 24 to 70, but they don't have a portrait lens in that. So I love learning that with a horse, we need to go to 135. I wish I had known that last month, because I think I might have had some pictures where they look like donkeys. Because with horses, they're bigger, you have legs, you have other body parts that you don't want distorted. Am I on track with that in your thinking? Yeah. Great.
With any type of horse image, the ears are key.
Okay.
So, having correct ears versus, again, donkey ears, when the ears lay out to the side, they look more like a donkey. When the ears are nice and pointed and facing forward, almost like a dog that's a pointer or a
Mhm.
Doberman pinscher. Depending on the discipline of horsemanship, so like for dressage or something, they like the nice pointy ears. So, you know, knowing these things, like when I photograph gypsy vanners, when they're running and the hair is flying, they always have one ear flipping back because they're listening behind them as the other ear is listening forward.
Mm.
And, it's sometimes hard if the owner says, oh, I really wish both ears were facing front while they're running. Well, it's a little hard to get because that's not in their nature to do that. But sometimes they do it. Now, posed, obviously you want really good ears on any horse. And if they feel safe and they're posed, you should be able to get that.
Okay. Are there some trips tips to when you're posing them to getting those ears forward or some
And,
noise or
and
something?
yeah, something that's going to grab their attention, and every horse is different. Um, so you have to know the horse, you have to have a conversation with the owner. You know, some horses, their ears will perk up at the sight of a little plastic grocery store bag, but other horses might freak out. And so you certainly don't want a horse freaking out. And I mean, you have a conversation with the owner, like, hey, what's going to get his ears up or her ears up? And the owner will know.
Mm.
So it's not you, they won't think that it's you being inexperienced. It's just like a kid, like, hey, what makes your kid smile for the camera, or what's a good bribery method with your child? It's the same
Mhm.
thing.
Right. When I photographed a woman with her 3 horses, we had buckets of food that we rattled, and she just kept pulling out good things to help me out. And I had plenty of time. And I also did a little Photoshop magic to do some ear swaps as needed, because I
Yeah.
knew that with this event where there were 10 photographs, each of us were assigned a minimum of 3 for posed, and we had like 15 minutes. And I'm like, I can't get great art in 15 minutes. And, trying to get the owner to relax. And, horses are, there's a lot of meat muscle there. There's a lot of, like, they're big. So you can't just like take them over there, right? They're, they're,
Um, Photographers don't realize is, and I teach this in my seminars, is horse owners, even if they've ridden a horse since they were 5 years old, they don't know how to pose with a horse.
right.
The minute you get out that camera and you say, all right, I want you to go over, I want you to put your hand around, the neck of your horse, they look really awkward.
Hmm.
And so there's kind of that little bit of warm up time, not for the horse, for the owner. And
Hmm.
if the owner is really nervous, the horse could get a little bit edgy as well because they can sense your heartbeat. They're very sensitive creatures, and horses are prey, not predators. So,
Mm.
dogs, even a cute little Pomeranian is a predator, and a big, huge 15-pound horse is still considered prey in the animal kingdom. So going into it knowing that these big, beautiful creatures are big scaredy cats half the time is also important to mention.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Um, when I was working with the woman with the 3 horses, I felt like I was photographing toddlers because I could tell they understood a lot, but they couldn't speak like a toddler. And she said, yeah, toddlers that can kill you because, you have to be careful. There was things I was uh, suggesting that she do, like kiss the horse on the bridge of the nose. And she said he could lift his nose and kill me. And so luckily she knew I hadn't done a lot of horses, but she trusted me and she was super, super happy with the work. But I also learned she teaches writing. So she's like you and she's got that teacher's heart. And, but yeah, it was hard in a like, okay, time to move and time to move. It was challenging for me to really get what I would love to have if I could have spent an hour with each of those subjects. But there were 10 of us. So these gals are going to have like 30 amazing photographs each. So, and so that's going to bring me to my next question. But before I go on to that, I wanted to see if there were other tips. So we've got women over 45 using the right focal length, considering a mirrorless eye tracking camera, pay attention to the ears. Any other things on our list that we need to, or
Yeah,
that?
if you're going to be taking action shots of someone's horse to create a beautiful piece of wall art, I would recommend shooting at least 1600th of a second or 2000th of a second. The worst thing is when you get a beautiful horse running and the hair is blurry. Getting all that hair in focus is really key to that really intense, dramatic photo of that horse. And I mean, I tend to like horses with a lot of hair. Now, if you're photographing a dressage horse that's all braided, very formal looking, you don't need quite the same speed, but be aware of your speeds. And also your f-stop, because horses are the size of a small car. Don't be going out there and shooting 2.8. I mean, you'll have the mom in focus, but then half the horse will start to fade off. So I tend to shoot as far away from a background as I can, meaning if I'm in a field, we've got like 200 yards behind us, hopefully, so that I can shoot it like f 8.0, and get the horse and the person in focus, and then the background can go soft behind them. But I do a lot of composite work with horses, because what I want to create for people, you can't really create out of camera, where I remove backgrounds or I add backgrounds or whatever the case may be. Another tip just to mention is, like you mentioned, that this person was an instructor. If anyone has interest in starting to photograph horses, they should absolutely take riding lessons. You go once a week for maybe 6 months, minimal investment, but it means that you're going to have to get a helmet and boots. It means you're going to have to learn how to tack up a horse, how to untack a horse, how to, brush and bathe a horse. You're going to pick up the language, and you're going to pick up a little bit of the culture. And, without that, there's going to be a disconnect no matter how good of a photographer you are. So just go for it. And, they'll put you on a nice, slow, older horse, fine.
I love it. So I was thinking, okay, how did I have the baby whisperer equivalent? Because I am the baby whisperer. And when I first started in photography, I worked for a company that got the list of newborns from hospitals, and they would go to the home with one light, one little background, use pillows and blankets and towels and things, put the baby on their stomach and pose them in ways where they looked older. And it was great training, because I watched this master handle a baby and tell me, be careful about the back underside of the arms. That's the most sensitive part of especially a baby, and the noises he made, and I still make those noises today, and that was 40 years ago or so. So yeah, get some training, get involved, get around your subject so you understand more. And yeah, writing lessons. I would need to feel much more comfortable. I was a little nervous about that. We all got in a line with all the horses, and I was a little nervous standing between two horses. They're big. They're not necessarily unpredictable, but for someone that is not that familiar with horses, knowing the cues for when to get out of the way, something I don't know. So thank you for that hot tip. So wanted to move into the Photoshop and composites and all the wonderful things that you do and that you teach. And I was pretty gobsmacked that you've been in Photoshop for 32 years. Did I get that right?
1993. Well, 1992 and a half. So yeah, around middle of 1992 when it first came out.
I didn't know we'd been out that long, but I've been out a long time now too on the planet. It went fast.
I was in version 1 of Photoshop.
Wow. So how did you decide, oh, this looks interesting, I'm gonna learn this? How did that come about?
So it's kind of an interesting story. I wasn't really enjoying photography, and I had left photography for about 2 years. And I was actually working in retail, managing Victoria's Secret at one of the it was the second largest volume store in the country. And, it was one of those moments where you're like, wow, I went to school and got a BFA and here I am working retail, like, what am I doing with my life?
Right.
But I needed a break and I needed to figure out what I really wanted to do. And in the meantime, I thought, you know what, and the reason I was able to get a position that high is I had worked there in college as well part-time. So in the summers that I wasn't running the black and white darkroom that I ran, I also had I had like 2 part-time jobs. I had this mall job. Because back in the 80s, I mean, being at the mall on your summer vacation was awesome. That was like what it was all about. And so working, during college at the mall was actually fun. And I ended up working at Victoria's Secret. So when I decided to go into the management, the district manager remembered me, and she thought I had, because I had my own business for a while, she thought I could have this, management job, which it was easy. I mean, they had everything lined out that you needed to do as a manager. So, but I will say I learned a lot about sales from that job, about add-ons and multiples. Because if you've ever walked into any limited corporation store, it's always like buy 1 for 25 or get 4 for 50.
Right.
They teach you how to sell in volume. So I had gotten to a point where I was like, okay, I don't really want to do retail anymore. I need to get back into photography. And Photoshop had come out, and I was at this crossroads. And I was like, if you don't learn Photoshop now, you're going to be completely worthless as a photographer, in the field of photography. Like, you have to learn photography, and you have to learn it where you're getting paid to learn it. And as it turned out, as fate would have it, there was an advertising agency looking to hire somebody with a BFA, which I had, in commercial art, which I had, who was a photographer, which I was, to learn Photoshop because nobody knew it yet. And so they were hiring photographers with commercial art backgrounds to learn Photoshop to work at the advertising agency. So I did get paid to learn it. And so I worked there for a year, and then they were hiring what was called digital imaging specialists, which basically is somebody who does high-end compositing, scanning, and editing, aka the 1990, I guess it was 1995 or 96. So in 1996, this was also a new thing. Like, okay, so we have these huge drum scanners at this publishing house. It was Rodale Press that publishes Men's Health Magazine and Prevention. Those are the 2 most famous. They were hiring people who knew Photoshop, who could come in and be digital imaging specialists, which sounded really great. And we were drum scanning, and we were editing the images, in Photoshop. We were actually on the internet, but it wasn't really the internet. It was the
Uh-huh.
start of the internet, and we had T3 cable lines because we were in publishing. So 1996 Summer Olympics, Rodale had a magazine called Fitness Swimmer. The images were being shot on a digital camera, which we were all like, oh my God, a digital camera, it's going to be horrible. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
You know, we were all like poo-pooing it. And they were going to send us these digital files through an FTP site over the internet for this issue of the magazine that had to go to press 3 days later. And we were like, oh, they're not sending us film. Why can't they FedEx us film? You know, we were all like, this is going to be horrible. And you know what? They were pretty nice.
Yeah. So your first Photoshop, the images were from film until this.
Yeah.
When Photoshop was invented, it wasn't like everyone's using digital cameras. Now we got to
Nope.
invent Photoshop. Photoshop was first, and then the cameras came out.
Yeah, you had to scan everything.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so that because you could do Photoshop, were you able to make those digital camera images comparable to the film?
Uh, yes. Now you got to remember the tools in Photoshop were very rugged back then.
Mm-hmm.
And the capabilities of the computers were also not quite strong enough to handle some of the tools like Fitness Swimmer. Fitness Swimmer wanted like this radial blur added to this page spread. And we're talking an 11 by 17 spread in an 8.5 by 11 magazine. It took 3 days for this radial blur to actually run in Photoshop. Like I think I started it on a Friday, so it would be done by the time I came back to the office on Monday. I mean, the hard drives were like 32 megs.
Yeah. I
It was,
I was I was sorry to interrupt, but I was trying to pick a bathroom sink when I remodeled my sink and computers were dial up. And oh my gosh, it took me days to look at, I'd be like, I'd go to this one, making those noises, and everything took so long. So, but you hung in there, and then Photoshop
yeah.
got to where we are today, which is what I want to kind of get a little info, tips, thoughts. So now the newest Photoshop includes AI, artificial intelligence. So I'd love to hear more about composites or how you approach it or how you're using Photoshop and other tools now. I know it's like there's this great big um, gift box of information and experience that you have, and I'm not sure what to pick out first. So I'll let you share what you think's important and helpful for people to know about artificial intelligence and composites and all that good stuff.
So when AI kind of first hit the wall in May of 2023, as far as being pretty mainstream, being part of Photoshop beta at that point, Midjourney had already been out for quite a while, and I had tinkered with Midjourney. I didn't get it, didn't understand it, didn't know how I felt about it. And then when Photoshop introduced AI in May of 23, I thought, well, if Adobe is putting AI into their software, maybe it's not so evil as everybody said it was. So I was taking a class in June of 23 with Scott Dietweiler, who is a physicist and also a photographer, and he really pulled back the curtain and explained how AI creates images. So I felt 100% confident with how the images were being created once I took his class. It was a week-long class. And I started teaching these composites because I stopped offering fairy tale composites to clients because I would spend, 30 hours looking for stock images to create the right look for the pet or the children, finding the right castle, the right time of day, the right camera angle. And it was like, I can't charge enough for the amount of work that goes into these composites. So I had walked away from them as something in my business. And what this has opened up the ability to do is cut that time, like shred that time to 1/10 of the time now, because some of this stuff you can create the whole background in a matter of a couple hours once you know what you're doing. I, was really enjoying like honing my skills in Midjourney, and then I was at Imaging USA in January, and I had the opportunity to talk privately with Julianne Cost from Adobe, and she's like, the end of the conversation, she's like, look, she goes, is there, any way you can start teaching Firefly? And I'm like, Firefly? I mean, I looked at it once. She goes, we just launched version 2, and she said it's really wonderful, and we paid the Adobe stock contributors that stayed on the site. We paid them for their images to be trained, and yada, yada, yada. So I was like, all right.
What is Firefly?
So Firefly is Adobe's platform for creating AI generated images. And it has a standalone site, which is firefly.adobe.com. You're already paying for it with your subscription, whether you get so many credits per month based on what level of subscription you have to Adobe. So I have the full suite. I have a professional account as an educator. I get a lot of credits per month. Some people get less than me, like there's like 250 credits per month, 500 credits per month, 1,000 credits per month. And then if you also pay for Adobe stock per month, you get 1,500 credits per month. However, there really is no reason to pay for Adobe stock, since you now can make the same image in the program. So you're kind of paying twice. So don't do that.
You can make the same program in Firefly or in Photoshop.
So if you're paying for Adobe stock per month to find images to composite, you can make that image in Firefly. So, you don't need to pay for the stock site anymore. You can just make the image. So Julianne had said to me, hey, when are you teaching your next workshop? And I said, March 2nd. We were talking on like January 27th or something. I don't know. And she said, do you think you can switch it over to Firefly? And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And so I came home and I was like the mad scientist for 3.5 weeks, like 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, learning Firefly. And I taught it. Everybody loved it. And then 2 weeks after I taught the class, Firefly updated again and everything changed. And then in the meantime, I learned several other programs that I use as what I call my spice rack. So when you're creating an AI generated image, you have your main program that you're going to create an image from. Like, if I'm in Firefly and I'm creating a beautiful path through a field for a horse to go on, or a dog, and there's pretty wildflowers and there's puffy clouds in the sky and butterflies, whatever the case may be. But if I want to add a certain look to it, there's all these other programs out there now that I've found are like the salt, the pepper, the garlic, the oregano, to add flavor to your image. What are
a few favorites?
I really like Krea. It's Krea. None of them are free. I also really like Magnifique. And there's a newer one that I just started playing with that's super expensive. So I don't know enough about it to mention it yet. And I still like Midjourney for certain things.
What's the expensive one?
I think it's like $69 a month.
No, what's the name of it?
I knew you were going to ask me that.
Okay, if it downloads, let me know in your brain.
It's Leonardo.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Leonardo.
So do you know, because in my fun photography, I used to use Topaz as Impressionist.
I use it all the time.
But it's no more.
That's not true.
Once I upgraded, upgraded to the AI sharpening, my whole Topaz thing disappeared, and everything I could read said that it doesn't exist anymore. So
what you have to do is you have to go to the Topaz website. You have to scroll down to the bottom to let me do it really quick so I can walk you through it. It's free. and it will work on the current version of Photoshop, and it's even working on the most updated OS on my computer.
Really?
Yeah, it's part of Topaz Studio too, which you're going to love compared to regular Impression. And by the way, you can still download Impression as a standalone program, and you can use it as standalone, and it will work.
Okay.
I love Impression. I've used it for years.
Yeah.
So when you go to the Topaz website, let me just walk through this really quick.
Okay. Should we pause or?
No, it's okay.
Okay,
When
so we go to the bottom.
you go down to the very bottom, and they keep changing their site, so it gets a little scary from time to time. Down at the very bottom, you go to downloads. When you get to the downloads page, you scroll all the way down, and there's a thing that says legacy apps.
Hmm.
And then click on legacy apps. After you click on legacy apps, you scroll all the way down, and you'll see Studio and Studio 2. And Studio 2 is the one that you want for either Mac or Windows. And you can download that. And Topaz inside of, or I should say, Impression inside of Studio 2 is 10 times better than standalone Impression.
Wow.
Because it allows you to treat it like an action kind of, where you load the image, you do the impression to it, then you can add other things to the image. Like you can add other filters that are all Topaz based filters. When you export it, it stays open inside Studio 2. So you export it out, you can open it in Photoshop, do more stuff to it. And then if you're like, you know what, I need more texture in the face, you can go back into Studio 2 while it's still open, change the face, export it again, and then throw that on a layer with a reverse mask. I mean, I could teach a whole seminar just on that.
Yeah. Wow. I love you. Thank you. That being said, I discovered a set of actions by Russell Brown because I wanted to do some painting-ish things on these horse images. And it gives you either a watercolor, a choice of options for watercolor, or what they call, I don't know, painting. And then there's a cartoon. And over the weekend, I kind of lost my mind playing around with that and came up with some really cool things, but knowing I can still use my Topaz. And it sounds to me like you're saying it is still a really good tool for creating artistic effects and not just doing a click, plug and play, and you like it or you don't, but that there's a way to really personalize it so it's your own art. Am I reading that right? Oh, you're muted. I can't hear you. Hello?
I'm still here.
There you go. Okay.
That was weird.
Yeah.
What I've discovered is when I teach one of my compositing AI classes and people are learning how to use Firefly or Midjourney or Kriya, people's individual style still comes out.
Right.
It doesn't have a soulless appearance to it. Like I could have a classroom of 18 people who I know their style, and they're sitting there generating something based on what I'm teaching, and all 18 images look completely different, and all 18 images look like that person's specific style. The other thing is what I do, and I teach this, is I create my background with the intention of what animal is going into this created background. I then bring the animal into the background. Then I will take it into a program like Kriya, where you can upload your image, and I'll add like what I call the little bit of zhuzhing, to the image in Kriya. I might make 4 or 5 versions of that, depending on like, I like the background on this one, I like the horse on this one. Oh, it made the horse look like a dog, so that's not going to work, whatever the case may be. And then you could take the whole thing into Topaz Impression inside Studio 2 and give it another kick in the butt, if I'm allowed to say butt, artistic flair inside Studio 2. And again, you could like maybe mask some of it off or blend some of it. There's a couple things in Studio 2 that I really like, as far as some of the presets that have cool little styles themselves that kind of match the style I'm going for. And then, for finishing touches, bring it all back in as a finished document and paint over top of it with, hand brush strokes to
So
get
you're
that
really, I'm sorry, to get that soft.
final finished look.
Mhm.
It's like a process, building up the layers.
Yeah. So you're really putting the art into photographic art, and in a way that is very much what's inside of you. You're not just saying, like, I don't know, back when, way back when Mid Journey hit, like a year ago, all these things, people were just typing in um, prompts or whatever you call it, and boom, things showed up. And that feels a little like, okay, what do we use that for? But what I hear is that your own artistic vision, inspiration, process, the whole journey of how you create art piece and how you teach that creation is very individualized, and not like a just a let's have an app on our phone and plug in and boom, it's art. Am I on track with that?
Yeah, you are. So, like, there is something I did want to point out. So, you know, people think that, and this is people that haven't actually done it, they think that, oh, you just type a bunch of words and you get this image. That's not art. That's not photography. I mean, I've been banned from photo groups on Facebook because I teach AI. It's like a witch hunt. And, listen, I've been a photographer since 1981. Okay. I just won the ISAP competition in 5 categories and the overall trophy, and they eliminated painting, specific retouching in many of the categories I entered, and I won with pure photography. So, I don't want, I want people to understand that I'm not trying to cheat the system. I mean, this is the future of our editing.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, the funniest part about this whole thing is, when I was in college, I hated art history. I hated going to the class. It was a long walk across campus. It was at 8 a.m., 3 days a week. I had art projects to work on. But you know what? Art history, when you're creating a prompt for an image in any of these programs, art history is a huge part of understanding a style.
Mm-hmm.
And, one of the things I taught in one of my classes was on creating an image that had a flare of a daguerreotype. And half my students didn't even know what a daguerreotype was. And it's in Firefly. And I love that it's in there. I love that they have these different movements that we learned in art history. And you may like a certain style and you didn't know what it was called because you didn't take art history. So for the first time in my life, I'm actually using art history. And I think that the things that this can do to help with the editing process as photographers who are trying to save time, but also offer clients work that they never could have offered because of what would be involved to do it the old way.
Right.
And also, I do want to mention one thing about restoration. People still go to photographers to restore images, and the AI technology has helped the restoration process immensely in speeding up the recovery of certain elements in a photograph, that more people could now offer restoration that if they wanted to, as part of their offerings to their clients.
Mm-hmm. So many things. So I love that you shared all that, because this weekend when I was, so my group of photography women, we have a show and tell once a year where we submit images that were taken or inspired by some of the lessons and the shoots and things that we did, because we have a meeting once a month. And I found this action, and like it reminded me of when I discovered SX70 film, and where you can move the emulsion around. Do you know what I'm talking about? Did you get into that, Judy?
Maybe.
You missed the window. So it was like photographic crack for those of us that found that the original SX70 that shoots out of print, that if you keep it warm, you can move the emulsion around and make it look like a painting. And
Oh,
I got completely addicted to that. Well, this weekend when I was playing with this, and I was like, I took a picture of the tops of flat buildings that I saw from my backyard with amazing clouds that just really struck me. And then the photograph was like, okay, yeah, I caught the feeling, but it's not quite there. And then as I was playing with this 2 days ago, and I was able to create it the way I would if I had painted it. And so I love what you just said, both that all your students have their own style, and that we are, well, anything. I just soaked up everything you just said, because I was thinking, is this cheating? Well, it can't be cheating. I'm feeling inspired again. What else? What else can I put in here? Um, and yeah, so thank you. Like, perfect timing to have this conversation with you, because um, why not? Like, art history, you know, first there was coal and goat blood and caves, and and chiseling out pregnant goddess women is little from rocks, and everything keeps evolving. And I love this thought that this is a part of the creative evolution and another tool we can use, and it ain't cheating. That's what I hear you say.
oh, when I got my artist degree through PPA, I used some stock images for the elements that I needed, and so did most people. I mean, not everybody shot every single element for their artist entries. If you needed a pelican and you didn't have a photo of a pelican, or you needed a hot air balloon and you didn't have access to one, you went and got these things from stock sites. And this is basically the same thing. The biggest thing people don't understand is the mathematical equation that makes the pixels up. And I think once people understand, and it's a long math. So I had a math person in my my East Coast school class. There was a woman in my class who was a degree in math. And in my private class on Facebook for the people that attended my class, I said to her after the fact, I said, here's the mathematical equation that makes up an AI image. I just want your opinion on this because you're a math person. And she looked at it. She goes, oh, this makes perfect sense. And I'm like, okay, because like it's all great to me. It's like a whole page long of pi and all those other symbols from calculus that I struggled with calculus. It was hard. And so it's very mathy. Okay. And when somebody says to me in a classroom, I think they're stealing people's images, I take a piece of paper and I rip it into 1,000 pieces. And I say, okay, you're in a room alone with a pen and paper. You have no cell phone, no windows, no nothing. And I say, draw a cat. And maybe you can draw a good cat, maybe you can't. But your brain is going to go to different places on the body of the cat and understand that, and I take the paper and I throw it up in the air, it's in a million little pieces, and I pick up one piece of paper and I say, this is one pixel that is on a billion cats. Like all a billion cats have this same one pixel. So you're going to take that one pixel from a billion cats and know that it needs to be there. The other thing is, if I said to you, draw a cat, and I put you in this room every day for a year, would your cat drawing get better? Yes, because you'll learn as you draw. And that's all it's doing.
I love that. I love that. Gosh, I could just talk to you for hours about all of this stuff, and has me thinking, is she going to teach at West Coast School ever?
No.
No, you're not coming to California?
They can't afford me. No, but you know,
so East,
I'm sure there'll be enough. Huh?
So on the East, they can afford you the week-long schools, or it's different schools?
Well, I don't have to fly to East Coast School. You know, I was able to drive. I mean,
but you get to be in California. You get to be here. So there's that. Although now that it's not in San Diego, it's a little different. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I've been getting requests to speak for other organizations like camera clubs that have 300 and 500 members. And, they're a little different than the PPA affiliates. So I'm starting to really get around, so to speak. So I'm sure you'll be able to come. But you can also take my online classes. They're always live first, and people love the live classes. There'll be a bunch in August because nobody wants to be outside photographing in August. I don't care where you live.
Yeah, it's not bad in San Diego usually, unless we get a rare heat wave here. But yeah, it is. It can be our hottest month. So you have on. It's not just which just isn't to diminish it, but you have online classes that are live. So a person like me who needs to ask questions, because if I get stuck, I get lost, then I get frustrated, and then I zone out. If you're like, where is that button? So you do have
they're always live first.
Oh, good.
Yeah, they're live first, and then they're recorded, for rewatching later. They're not downloadable. You watch them on the site. It's all nice and organized. And my education site, like, the whole reason I launched it is because everything is contained on the site. The Zoom link, the brushes I give, the files I give, because what I discovered early on in teaching is that photographers are like ADHD, like they're all over the place. Like, I didn't get the Zoom link. I don't know where the brushes are. I lost this. I lost that. And it's like, you know what? I needed an education site that took care of that for you. So when I get one of those frantic emails, I say, just go to the site, log in, go to the class. It's all there waiting for you. You don't have to worry about losing anything. So, I guess I'm really organized. I've been told when people.
Yes, I've noticed just in our prep that you wanted to be prepared, and which I appreciate that. I'm as kind of random as I can be. I'm always more comfortable when I'm prepared anyway. Okay, so 2 quick questions. Where can somebody discover more about you, your classes, get in touch with you?
So my education website is education.judyreinfordphotography.com. I have, like I said, there's going to be several classes. They're not there yet. There's only one listed right now for the end of July that's upcoming. But there'll be a bunch in August. And then I am teaching I leave next weekend. I leave for PPS NYS, which is the New York week-long school. And then I have a sold out workshop in September, photographing gypsy banners in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. In August, I'm teaching online for Vermont PPA, a full day class that's on the 11th of August.
Mm.
And then there's a workshop I'm working on coming up in the fall, possibly in North Carolina, that we're still finalizing the details. That's going to be a hands-on 2-day workshop on photographing dogs. And there's several huge things coming up in the new year in 25. In November, I'm speaking for a camera guild or camera club in Tampa online in November. But next year in 2025, I'm already booked to go to about 7 different states, and I can't really reveal where I'm going yet.
All right. So get on your radar. I'm guessing you email out that information, or somehow people can find out more about all the things as they come up.
Yep, they just have to go to my website, education.judyreinfordphotography.com, and sign up for the newsletter. And then whenever I send out a class that's coming up, they'll get the email.
Fantastic. All right. So my last question is really just giving you the opportunity to leave us with a parting thought, or if there is one thing you would, after we stop, you'd be like, oh, I wish I had mentioned that. So the floor is yours.
I guess in staying in line with the AI hot topic, whether you like it or hate it type thing. At Christmas, somebody I went to college with, Christmas night, his house burnt to the ground.
Oh, geez.
And the family dog saved everybody's life. And they got out with only one cell phone, the dog, and their pajamas. And everything was lost. And there was a painting in the house that his grandmother had done that I remember from college when I went home with him to visit. One Christmas break, we went, like a bunch of us went to visit. And he had a cell phone photo of that painting. And I said to him, I can recreate that painting with AI and get it as close as possible to what you lost, that can then be printed on canvas and embellished and framed. And it's gonna originate from your cell phone photo, which is the original image of that piece of art. So it's better than nothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he loved that. He loved that idea. And that was kind of a moment where I realized the good that AI could hopefully do in the world with art restoration from loss. You know, when somebody has I'm not saying like a Rembrandt, no. I'm talking about, something that you have that was a family heirloom, even a
Mm-hmm.
photograph, on a wall, that you have a photo of the photograph, or you have a low res image of grandma and grandpa from 1923, and you want to restore it. And Kriya does an amazing job. If you take the image right into Kriya, it does some weird things. Obviously, all this stuff does, but especially with hair, Kriya does an amazing job at restoring hair.
Mm.
So even if you use Kriya just to restore grandma and grandpa's hair on top of their head, because in Photoshop, you're really struggling with that because hair is hard to recreate.
Right.
So AI is going to, really help in many ways in our editing skills down the road and save us time that we'll probably use to do more photography.
Right. I got it. Well, Judy, this has just been delightful and perfect timing, since I just did some horse things, and then I just did a bunch of editing that I included a little bit of AI. So I hope it's perfectly timely for people that are listening. I'm so excited to share this conversation with my group, Women in Creative Photography. And they're going to absolutely love it. So Thank you, thank you, thank you. And remember, listeners, to hang on, and I'll do a little quick wrap up, little quick summary of what we chatted about, although there was so much. So you are such a blessing to our industry, and just to me personally today has been really a delight. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh, goodness, that was so great. And I selfishly got a lot of information that I wondered about with AI, and she was gracious enough to share a few things specifically that I needed to know. That, sorry, you don't get to hear that, but she's a teacher at heart. So let's see. Tips on photographing animals. She said the best customer is a woman over 45 that owns a horse. Number two, keeping your focal length at least 135. If you're doing action shots, especially consider mirrorless with eye tracking cameras. Four, remember, ears are important, and generally they need to be in front so the horse doesn't look like a donkey. If you're doing action shots, a 16th of a second or more. Have an f-stop, at least f8, and then try to be farther away so that then the background will also get creamy. And then if you're really serious about horse photography, take 6 months of riding lessons. And then we talked about all things AI, artificial intelligence, and we discussed things about Firefly, uh, generative AI, other programs in her spice rack like Korea, Krea, Magnifique, Leonardo, the old Topaz filters are still available, and she helped us figure out how to find that. And that is all I have to say, but I absolutely feel that you all are so excited, or there's just one of you sitting listening. So I'm talking to you. I know you're super grateful that Judy said yes to being on the show and got so much out of it. And be sure to go to her teaching website and see all the places that you can learn from her, because she I'm just really impressed with how great of a teacher she is and how much she loves teaching and how much she loves doing what she's doing. Okay, bye for now, and sending a great big hug.